Hi, Nitin. Thank you for joining us. How are you today? You okay?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Danny. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Been a bit busy, but as much as we can be. So since we're entering the fourth week of lockdown, I mean, how are you finding it? And are you still working? You still got busy pipelines?
Yes. We're a multidisciplinary firm of regional solicitors, and there are parts of our business that have held up very well throughout this crisis, and certainly seen an upturn in work. But it goes without saying that there are lots of other areas of our business that are just working through existing pipelines, and I anticipate that there will be sort of quite a significant drop-off in work, certainly in those areas that are doing property work over the next 2 or 3 months. I suppose the real litmus test will be how quickly things rebound after the kind of more stringent lockdown comes to an end.
Yeah, well, I mean that's the thing. We're hoping from the property side as well, obviously, because it's hand in hand with conveyancing and estate agents like myself. We're hoping that in 3 weeks, that's going to be what we're going to be able to open up and actually do our job. That's effectively it, because we're restricted. So where are you guys based? You're BTMK Solicitors, and what's a little bit about your outfit?
Well, we're based across South Essex and in London. We've got 5 offices around South Essex, so Southend-on-Sea, which is our sort of natural home.
Right.
We've then expanded over the last sort of 4 or 5 years into Leigh-on-Sea, also into Rayleigh, all sort of important commercial hubs in South Essex.
Yep.
And then we have a shared office space in the Leadenhall building in London, and that's more there for seeing commercial sort of organisations based throughout London. But it just gives us that flexibility of going to clients when it might not be as easy for them to travel to us.
Also, you've got a central location where people can find you as well, which is handy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing that this has actually, this current crisis has taught us is that I think geography is going to be less important than ever going forward in terms of who you can do business with. I think everybody has been forced to get on the radar with Zoom and Microsoft Teams, all of the various sort of myriad of different WebEx call facilities that are out there. And I think now, people are going to see the real value in not having to travel, save on travel time to go and see clients. I think the reality is that we all miss that human contact of being able to shake hands with people and look people in the eye, and so much of that is so important in everything we do. That trust factor with solicitors. But we're getting by at the moment, and we are, our sort of wings are well spread across Essex in terms of our reach for clients.
Yeah, because we've touched upon this already. The lockdown really has affected your business, but hasn't paused, because there's still work to do. It just, albeit at a slightly slower pace, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, it's not even at a slower pace. I mean, all of our teams that are doing family and matrimonial work involving children and child protection. Yep. I mean, those teams are busier than ever, because the courts recognise that justice can't stop for those really important parts of work, especially where children are involved. Safety and safeguarding of children, visitation and custody arrangements, all of those areas of work are being prioritised by the courts. So those departments are busier than ever, because they're obviously having to work. Courts can actually fit more hearings in when they're doing them remotely. So sometimes in certain very discrete areas, justice actually moves far quicker than might be the case if you're going to the courts in person.
Yeah, that's interesting. And in terms of the conveyancing side of things, residential, obviously, which is specific for us, what are the current government directives you're seeing from the legal industry?
Well, so the overriding theme is obviously everybody must comply with the social distancing guidelines.
Yeah.
Okay. There is no discrete guidance in place to say you mustn't move or you mustn't carry on with the legal process. I think the government has set down 3 kind of three pillars of guidance, which I think everybody must abide by. 1, you mustn't break the social distancing rules and guidelines. 2, the parties should aim to be more cooperative with each other. In the event that one party or more in the chain of transactions can't comply, for example, if a family is self-isolating, and that puts at risk the entirety of the chain.
Yeah.
I think the reality of it is that the rest of that chain, even though they might themselves be unaffected, are expected to cooperate to move within reason any completion dates or dates for exchange of contracts to try and not jeopardise the entire series of transactions.
Yeah.
The third pillar is, of course, that you must they've made it easier for or the process easier for mortgage offers and deadlines on those to be extended to allow the parties to be a bit more flexible in their approach. Yeah,
no, we've seen that. I think the lenders are definitely starting to realise that they have to be a bit more flexible. They sort of shut down initially when Rishi Sunak announced all the lovely things promised, and then realised actually you can't be that harsh. You have to be a little bit lenient. Yeah, definitely. So, and how are your staff dealing with the change in working conditions? As we were discussing before, are they happy working remotely?
I think that what I'm hearing through all of I'm trying to stay in contact with as many of our directors and heads of departments as possible on a daily basis. I know that those directors and heads of departments I use directors because we're a limited company rather than a traditional partnership. So that's the reason for that reference. But I know that those department heads are very, very much staying in close contact with their teams that report directly into them, using Zoom and Microsoft Teams calls and things like that. And our activity, our email and communication activity across the board through all of the platforms that Microsoft provides, which is predominantly a program or a software package called Teams, is up by about 167%. So, it's just showing that, people are communicating, people are staying in touch. I think people are missing their friends and colleagues at work. I mean, I think what can't be escaped is the amount of time we spend with our work colleagues. It's probably more than we spend with our families. And ultimately, if you take that part of the equation out of your working or your daily life, people miss it. And all I can hear is people are itching to get back into the office to start seeing their friends and colleagues.
Well, and it would have a massive factor on almost mental well-being, as we've just touched on, because I'm not seeing my colleagues. I know, granted, we're a lot smaller than you, but you work so intimately with people on a daily basis, and you're, all and sundry, high emotions. It must be tough, and especially when you can't just gather in an office and talk about what you need to talk about without having to, back and forth. It's hard.
Agreed. I mean, that ability to be able to bounce things off a colleague who you sit near, people, I guess, to take for granted. Largely our offices are open plan working environments, so there's that opportunity to go and bounce something off a number of people. There'll always be somebody around. Yeah. And even though with technology and modern communication methods, it's not difficult to pick up the phone or send an email, but it's not the same either. There's that element of perhaps feeling like you're bothering somebody, whereas if they're just sat next to you to say, look, I've got this tricky situation, how would you handle it? This is my take on it. What do you think? But yeah, I think, I'm very proud to say that we're a huge group of friends at BTMK, really without exception. And I think the fact that people are missing that working environment is a great sign for me. It means that everything we've tried so hard to achieve over the last X number of years has been really positive. And I think it will make that transition back to the office that much easier as well.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You just took the words out of my mouth. I think negative working environments and conditions will not stimulate people. But if they're itching to get back and actually get back in the throng, that's just massive kudos to you and BTMK, isn't it?
Yeah. No, we're in my mind's eye, I'm looking forward to the day when we can sort of open our doors again to the public and open our doors again to all of our team members. We actually work in the building that I'm predominantly located in. It's a multi-tenanted building, so actually we miss seeing all of those other tenants around as well. There's lots of other professionals in this building, and there's a lot of work referral that goes on between the different disciplines that occupy the building, and obviously from a business point of view, we miss that interaction as well.
Yeah, and the referral thing as well. You don't realise that actually that is a massive thing, because at the moment everyone's trying to keep it to themselves to a degree, and sharing is not. You just can't do it at the moment. You have to manage your own pipelines and just try and get keep the income stream positive.
Yeah. And I think sometimes you just seeing somebody in the corridor or up and down the staircase, that prompts you to think, actually, I needed to speak to that person about this client or that client, and that automatically just gets put to the back of the queue. I'm sure it will resurface, but it's down at the bottom of the priority list at the moment.
Well, I suppose top of the priorities is taking care of transactions that started before the lockdown. I mean, how are your staff handling that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing really to stop those. The difficulty in, I mean, if you take, for example, a property transaction or a commercial transaction, the difficulty is that, there seems to be at all stages, or certainly there was about a week, 10 days ago, somebody in that link of people that's missing, either because they're self-isolating or they're shielding or they're but I think that has actually largely resolved itself over the last couple of weeks, because now everybody is working from home. There's no reason for people to think actually that person will be in the office, and if they're not there, then for some reason that transaction must stop or reach a standstill. I think everyone's largely successfully dealt with the redirection of phones, emails, communication. So I think the only things that are really stalling are those where there's a physical requirement to attend. So if you're, for example, we do a lot of commercial landlord and tenant work where leases come to an end, and the tenant and the landlord have to have an argument about what dilapidations that there are at the end of that period. Now, the reality of it is that process stops at the point at which a surveyor can't gain access to the building in order to go and do a survey of the dilapidations that are being complained of. And there's no getting around that. You just can't do it. It can't be done by replacing that physical visit with
virtual
technology.
No, exactly.
It just doesn't work. A lot of the things are very nuanced, and they need a physical eye looking at them to say, look, does that fit inside or outside the scope of dilapidations that the tenants agreed to or bound by? Those things naturally are going to halt. But we're hoping that when things rebound and the lockdown is phased out, and people can come back to work and start visiting physical places, then all of that work should just rebound. It shouldn't, it should just be there to pick back up again.
Well, there has to be mutual agreement, doesn't there? Because if it's a simple practicality issue and it can't be done, then there's nothing you can do. You just have to accept that and put it on hold and then wait until you can. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
Agreed, exactly. Is there, presumably though, certain data would be maybe too sensitive to be sent from a home system, even if it's via VPN or secure? I mean, is there any way you're working around that in terms of sharing that data?
Well, I think VPNs and, I think working within a recognised bubble is the key to all of this. We've been very lucky. Our head of IT, who's an ex IT head of IT from somewhere in the city, and moved back locally, has been with us about 15 months now, 14, 15 months, pardon me. And he's brought our entire infrastructure within the Microsoft Office 365 environment, which I think is everyone accepts as the industry standard for security. Multi-factor authentication for access to all of our systems. So, you log in from home, but because it's not on the Office network, you are then required to go through a two-phased security check. Right. But within that bubble, at the end of the day, we are, Office 365 is the recognised security product and is the standard bearer. So there's no reason why anything passed within that bubble it shouldn't be secure. I think the problem is when people might try and bypass that because of ease. Want to use a home email address because it's just easier. It's on a computer that they're on
like
at that
Gmail.
moment.
Yeah.
It's resisting that temptation not to do that and to say, right, you must send this to my work email address. Because that's covered in that bubble. And of course, we are transmitting lots of sensitive information. And that's
and lots of firms will be as well. And that, you've just highlighted that it has to be authenticated through the relevant bubble or product, otherwise it doesn't work.
Yeah. So I think the other thing is that you've got to remember that that's on one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is obviously there's a lot less travel. There's a lot less laptops being left in cars, files being transferred from office to home, even though obviously we have very strict guidelines about, security of client matters and client files. So, on the one side, yes, cybersecurity is taking a higher priority. But on the other side, the security and the threat is reduced on lots of other aspects because people are not traveling to court. They're not traveling to mediation physically. They're doing those within their home environment. So there is a lot less risk of the loss of or theft or misuse of data. So, it cuts both ways, I guess.
Yeah, no, but very relevant point. Very relevant. So in terms of how conveyance is actually allowed to process, what in terms of ongoing transactions, and we're hearing a lot of, on the grapevine that exchange and completions are not permitted. We've got a handful on our pipeline where some solicitors are saying, oh yeah, we can, and you shouldn't be silly, or others are saying, no, I'm not going to do it until lockdown's over. I mean, what is the actual, from your perspective, what are you doing about it?
Well, I think it's, without wishing to dodge the question, I think it unfortunately is one of those where every situation has to be dealt with on its own merits. If you're dealing with moving in and out of a property where there are no current occupiers, the property's empty, it's been given with vacant possession, and that could be any number of reasons. It could be probate sales, it could be an investment property that a landlord's selling in between tenancies. There's absolutely no reason why those transactions could not and do not proceed. They can and they should. But similarly, as I said, those 3 pillars that the government has given guidance on set down in the emergency legislation, which is everyone must always bear in mind social distancing. I mean, the practical reality of it is that physically moving with the benefit of a removals company is a nightmare at the moment because understandably, those removals companies are taking huge amounts of extra precautions. The cost of that we are seeing going through the roof. I think sometimes unfairly so. I think some people, providers, logistics companies are perhaps taking some advantage, and that's off-putting to a number of people. But I think every transaction has just got to be taken on its own merits, because it might not depend on your part of the transaction up or down in the chain. But the issue could be somewhere that's 3 or 4 steps away from you in that chain.
Yeah. And I'm supposing you're seeing an impact on the speed of transactions as well. We've seen them slow, definitely. I don't
absolutely. I think at the end of the day, there's, our business probably does somewhere in the region of 300 completions a month.
Volume.
And, that volume has obviously fallen, but it's fallen obviously because of some of the practical realities, but also just because the additional steps that people are having to take in that process are taking longer. And so the length of a transaction, the natural lifespan of a transaction is that much more.
Yeah, because there's a lot more back and forth.
And obviously, as we all know, until there is an exchange and thereafter in a completion, nothing's completely secure, so, you need those legal aspects to be completed before, you can be sure that the transaction's done. And from a lawyer's point of view and any other professionals in that chain, to make sure their fees secured.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we all need to get paid, don't we?
That's right.
Yeah, definitely. So on that, are you allowed to take on new work at the moment? I've heard of the odd sale being impacted, because, for example, a commercial purchase that wouldn't require a physical viewing. Are these allowed to start?
Yes. There's nothing we're taking on. We've still got a pipeline of new work. I think in some ways it would be you would be jeopardising the future success or otherwise of the business by not taking on new work. The reality of it is that what you're constrained by are the steps that you might be able to take in that ordinary space of time. But we are definitely receiving still memorandums of instruction from property agents to say this sale or purchase has been agreed. At least you can get on with doing all of the basic work until it perhaps hits a standstill a bit later down the transaction line.
Well, that's very positive. I'm pleased to hear that. At least something is going on. So for a bit of advice, if you don't mind, anyone who's in the middle of a purchase right now, is there any tidbits or advice you could give to help them push things along?
In order to push things along, you really got to, I suppose, it's keeping that dialogue going. Okay, so if you're in a purchase, keeping that dialogue going, and often, the agents are the right place to start with that, because they've got the communication line with the vendor. At the moment, that communication line between solicitor client agent is a bit more strained because of the different working environments. But if you speak to your counterparty in the transaction, and just find out and have a really straight down the line discussion with them to say, look, what is the situation? What are you thinking? What's going on with your chain that I don't know about, because they might be purchasing elsewhere, and they will know what the constraints are on that side. So I think in terms of practical advice, I think that's all really we can say at the moment is just stay in touch and keep the lines of communication open. And naturally, the guideline and the law is that everyone should be cooperative, everyone should be flexible.
Yeah.
But these transactions should ultimately be able to be progressed, and things can be done in that period of time.
Yeah, and also just keep things positive. It doesn't have to be
Absolutely.
all doom and gloom. No, I agree. And would you have any comment on how you see things working once we exit the lockdown over the next say, I don't know, 6 to 9 months towards the end of 2020?
Well, I mean, our business planning is all being done on the basis that we will see an immediate upsurge in work, because there's a huge amount of transactions at the moment that are what I would call have got the brakes on them because they're, for all of the reasons we've discussed, and everybody will be very keen and very anxious to get those over the line, because there will be mortgage offers once we come out of the lockdown where lenders will say, well, look, no, we have to put a timeline on this mortgage offer now. We've been reasonable, but it has to complete by this date. So I think people will rush. The unknown in all of this is how much price correction there might be. Yeah. And I'm certainly not an expert on valuation and what the level of that price correction might be. But one assumes that everyone will be thinking that there will be some price correction, and to what extent people are put off from progressing their transaction because they think there's going to be better value to be had by waiting. So our thinking at the moment is that the immediate period after coming out of lockdown and being able to return, and everyone, not just us as a practice, but everyone, the economy at large being able to go ahead and move forward, we should see certainly 1 quarter's worth of very strong trading. Okay, yeah. is how we are anticipating it. Okay. But after that, it's very much a case of who knows. It's seeing what comes in through the pipeline.
Well, this is it. I mean, from our perspective as, valuers and residential estate agents, we just don't know. There's no way of telling, and you just have to, warn, basically, as you said, dialogue. We're just working with our vendor clients and future potential vendor clients to just say, look, keep an eye on the prices. We'll tell you what we think professionally, and then just have to roll with it, case by case. That's all you can do.
Yep. Agreed.
Well, thank you very much, Nitin. That was very insightful. If anyone has any further comments or questions, how can they reach you? How can they find you?
So the easiest way is through our website, to be honest. We've got a 24/7 telephone line, which is on our website. Our website is www.btmk.co.uk. We've got lots of communication methods on there: live chat, 24/7 telephone lines, direct email addresses, a general email address, which is info@btmk.co.uk. And rest assured, we'll make sure people get through to the right teams, and where possible, if I can help directly, then naturally I will.
Great. Well, thank you, Nitin. Thank you very much. And
much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye now.